Hello, friends. I'm Chris McMillon with Autonomy Season 1, and I'm here with the soil doctor, Evan Folds of beagriculture.com. Evan is going to be one of the speakers at the upcoming Red Pill Expo in Hartford, Connecticut next month. Evan, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me today. How are you today?
Oh, I'm great. Thank you for asking. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Well, could you talk for a minute about your website and what you're doing basically to make the world a better place?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you got that vibe checking it out. It's a constant transformation and it doesn't really represent a lot of what I do, but that's something that I'm somewhat figuring out. I've owned my own businesses for 15 years. I owned a retail gardening store, organic and hydroponic gardening store. Basically consulted the public on how to grow their own food and medicine. And did that for 15 years, had a wholesale gardening company, sold compost tea equipment for a decade, had an organic lawn care company, commercial wheatgrass business, ran a market vegetable CSA farm. All of that was happening at one time at one point. So it was a busy 15 years that was amounted to a bit of a boot camp for me. I didn't really get into it all for business. It was just the only way I could pay the bills and, preach the gospel, so to speak. So from what I was inspired to. I was inspired by a book called Secrets of the Soil. I always like to share that because it's really a remarkable book that asks you to consider that there's more to life than what's physically here. The concept of life force. Why does a plant grow up against gravity? We don't ask ourselves these questions. There was a guy, Victor Schauberger, who's known as the water wizard. He put it this way. He said, we spend so much time thinking about how Newton got hit in the head by an apple and pondering gravity, but we never ask ourselves how the apple got up there to begin with.
That's
And
true.
so there's this kind of like riddle of life, right? That we're ripping the forest apart to study the trees. So that hit me like a ton of bricks. And I went through all of these experiences and came out the other side about a year and a half ago. I sold my wholesale company and backed out of the rest of businesses and conventional businesses and discovered that I had a lot of skills that could help other people. And so I'm in the process of figuring out what that looks like. It could be certifying products, organic, registering them, or soil testing and agronomy. It just kind of is a broad spectrum. So I engage people on that front, and I developed a consulting platform called bioenergetic agriculture. The premise being that a living system has full mineral, biological, and energetic capacities. Conventional farming is physical and mineral. You plow and you fertilize, then you chase all the problems you create around, essentially. Or organics kind of backs into the biological realm because it's natural. It's supposed to be. And then they both completely discount the energetic realm and the idea of life force. That's really carried by the concept of biodynamic agriculture, the work of Rudolf Steiner. Steiner's had a tremendous influence on me. I found him through the biodynamic methods he developed in 1924. And that really inspired me. And so what I tried to do was combine all of that. And I operated as a consultant in agronomy for a couple of years before I closed my businesses. And one day I was making a little logo, BE Agriculture, for bioenergetic agriculture, and it just kind of hit me like, oh, be a part of agriculture. Whether we realize it or not, we already are, right? Eating is an agricultural act. So most people get overwhelmed by having to grow their own food, but frankly, we can eat our way into a reasonable food system. So that's kind of a lot of what I've become is beagriculture.com. For some reason, serendipitously was available. And I just put up, I kind of scrubbed the internet of my former businesses and sold off the rest of it. And it kind of operates as a connecting point, to get the message of what I'm trying to do out there and then show people that I'm not just some dude sitting in his garage, which is, I guess, what websites do on some level. So that's kind of where it came about.
Yeah, so it's accumulation of everything that you've previously done has now kind of condensed into Bee Agriculture.
Yeah. I think a way to put a point on it is I really, my experience and my beliefs are that agriculture is really the source of the problems that we have in a meta way, and that it's also the solution. If we fix our soil, we fix ourselves from a nourishment standpoint and sick care and health care. And from a job creation standpoint, less than 2% of people identify as farmers now. 70% of our food that's eaten in the U.S. is processed. It's not even real. So we're killing ourselves, and we're being sold a bill of goods. That's a little bit of where it interfaces with the red pill dialogue. I'm hoping to bring this awareness of how we've been indoctrinated through our food system, and how we have the power to overcome it. And the quote that really got me started in this 15 years ago. It was from the agriculture course that I described. I read that after those lectures after The Secrets of the Soil. And Steiner's asked, why is the will for action towards healthy impulses so weak? This was 1924. And his answer was it was a matter of nutrition. He said food no longer contains the forces people need to build a bridge from thinking to will and action. And for me, that's it, and what I've experienced, like especially with the wheatgrass business that I had, a very, name something in your diet every single day that's alive, that's potent, doesn't exist for the average person at a high level of intention, even for someone that grows their own food. So, I've seen living foods change people, and instead of kind of the world coming to them, they're leaning forward, and it's literally a nourishment capacity. So that's a lot of what drives me, is knowing that real food can change people. And then looking out into the agricultural system and reading tea leaves and seeing the way things are built. And why do we drink orange juice for breakfast? Because we're told to, right? I mean, and it's not that orange juice is bad for breakfast. It's just that realization is very fundamental to taking control of how we eat.
That's fascinating. It all is. I am happy to say that every morning I go out to my garden and get a handful of kale, and within 10 minutes it's in the smoothie and in my stomach. So
you're way ahead of the game, man. That's awesome.
Yeah. And the book you're referring to, Secrets of the Soil, by Peter Tompkin and Christopher Bird, yes? When did that come out? Do you know about?
I think it was the 90s, but I'm not exactly sure about that. It was their follow-up book. Most people know The Secret Life of Plants.
Okay.
I think Stevie Wonder did a soundtrack that was the late 70s, maybe early 80s.
Yeah.
And that was more of the mainstream, talk to plants, put a EEG on them, those sorts of things. But Secrets of the Soil is a little bit more esoteric, a little bit more agriculturally bent rather than plant bent. And I think it's a really interesting distinction. Agriculture today grows plants, or tries to at least. What we need to be doing is growing the soil. And that understanding is really the heart of how we can change the world through food and through agriculture. And I'm convinced there's no more powerful way to do it, honestly.
What's happening in the water fluoridation fight? Are cities pushing back overall? Is there good news out there? What's happening on that front?
It's amazing. I'm curious what makes you bring that up, because I've spent a long time fighting that issue locally. Did you see that on my website somewhere, or?
Yeah, and I've heard a few of your previous shows as well.
Okay, right on.
Yeah.
Right on. Yeah, it's that's one of those we're doing it to ourselves moments. And why do we spit toothpaste out?
Yeah.
Swallowing fluoride is it's a neurotoxin. It's all of these things we've come to find out within the last 10 years, which is long enough for us to come to common sense on it, are understood. But the real trick of it, having run up against this for a long time, is that it's not a federal decision or a state decision, right? They do a lot of lobbying. It's one of the top 10 medical, incidents of the last century, all of the yada, 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 the history of how Albert Bernays, marketed fluoridation with the sugar industry back in the 40s when people's teeth were falling out. I researched the city minutes of my town, and I was the first one. This was probably 10 years ago, and I went to the local water authority and I used the 4 minutes of public time and inquired and asked, would you give me your dog and pony show and what the hell you're doing? And they had never mentioned the word fluoride in the minutes of city council since 1955. And that was when it was voted in by the public. But come to find out, all 8 of the people commissioned to the local board of discovery to research the issue were against it. And yet the public voted it in, and that had to do with the way it was marketed to people, right? So we put in, so the point of that, where I started, was that it's a local decision. And unfortunately, local municipalities don't have the bandwidth or the wherewithal or the budget to go research it the way that it needs to. So they defer to the CDC. You call the CDC and they're like, well, we didn't make you do it. So, and then you're round and round you go, right? So we're stuck in this rut. And unfortunately, you don't move people by telling them it's bad for you. You move them by expressing a liability or a cost benefit. So one of the ways to do that is, in Massachusetts, just a number of years ago, we dosed what's called hydrofluosilicic acid, HFS, and it's a byproduct of the phosphorus fertilizer industry. and it's capturing these smokestacks, which are mandated because back in the day when they started making phosphorus fertilizer, it was killing the agriculture within miles around the plant. And so the EPA makes them sequester this HFS. That material has radioactive components, cadmium, arsenic. It's really terrible. And that stuff is sold to a middleman, chemical distributor. That chemical distributor sells it to our municipality. That's put directly into the water. The only thing ever tested for in that whole pipeline is the amount of fluorine in the water after it's added, which they monitor very closely, right? And they're very proud of. But they just know not what they do. And I would just also make the point that what's in toothpaste is pharmaceutical grade. It's very clean, made in the lab intentionally for that purpose. Doesn't come with industrial byproducts. So the fact that we're swallowing industrial byproducts should tell you enough. But as to your question, basically there's blinders on without being exposed to a liability. I've gotten some traction locally, funding a couple of champions by illustrating the fact that they're trucking this stuff through town and they don't have any insurance on it. And in Massachusetts, they started talking about a tank filled and it melted the concrete. So you can get people's attention, county attorney, city attorney, do we have insurance on this? No, but you know what? They've spent millions of dollars to develop the infrastructure, so it's really difficult for them to back away from it. Not to mention admitting that they've been poisoning people for 50 years. So it's a tough one, man, and the tracks are you educate the public, which is a tremendous burden of proof, or you find a champion within the decision-making structure that can see the light and drive the conversation.
Yeah, it's I suppose you've just got to learn to speak their language. You've got to be very subtle, and the example you've used without the insurance and the fact that it spills and the effect it has. In my hometown, I know there's a group that they've taken it to the city council, and even the people in charge who were presented the facts, they said, look, you're right. I mean, we can see what you're saying, but if they say it's safe, and they didn't want to put themselves at risk by making that big decision for so many people. They were just too afraid of the lashback, even though my friends presented them the facts. I mean, it was undeniable, but there's still that fear factor of making the changes that are necessary. It's
so powerful. I mean, I'd say that's probably the number one preventative from us moving in all the ways that we need to. I mean, Dr. Zach Bush, who's going to be presenting at the Red Pill, a hero, man. This guy's holding some remarkable space. Talk about, turning 180 and seeking the truth. My son, Dylan, want to interview, buddy. Hey, go get this. I'll be done in a minute. But he is he's holding some serious space in regards to the transition of agriculture, big scale agriculture. He's a triple board certified MD and did a total 180 when he saw the truth, right? Because that's what he was following, and it's very refreshing. But I bring it up because he's starting a group called Farmers Footprint that's helping conventional farmers transition to regenerative farming. They're going from 40 acres, $40 an acre corn subsidy through the government, paid for agriculture that's completely on its head, to $900 an acre regeneratively. And it takes 3 seasons to do it. So the trick is, how do you transition a farmer that's not going to get subsidies from the government anymore, and they're going directly to the public to fund it? It's amazing. But he said the number one thing preventing farmers from jumping on board was the ostracization locally, was being, ostracized from their local community, being, from them raising their hand saying, we're going to do something different. It's simply essentially implicating that everyone had been doing something wrong. So there needs to be like a focus and a word and a conversation about that phenomenon, because that's what we have to overcome. It's not, the world doesn't work the way that it should, unfortunately, at this point, and unraveling that is a lot trickier than people imagine when you start getting into the guts of it.
I did not realize that was, I knew, I was aware of Dr. Zach Bush, but I did not realize that that's one of the fights he's taken up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. It kind of resonates the issues that Joel Salatin as well had to go through.
A lot of the same impulse,
Yeah.
The freedom component, the autonomy. That's really, we need to become our own experts. That's really it. And for me, you can't do that unless you're nourished. And that's black and white and not true for everyone, but it absolutely, on balance, is true. We're so malnourished we don't even know it. And so it's interesting to me you bring that point up about Zach Bush. Is he has this quote where he's like, no matter what I study, energy or health or whatever, I always end up in the soil, you know? Because that is it. You know, when we've had the ability to take advantage of tremendous resource of topsoil for a long time, that's frankly running out, and farmers are hitting a wall. And you know, that's kind of how we move, isn't it? As humans, we have to kind of run out of everything and create a disaster in order to change it. And I think that's what we're seeing, frankly, in the food system.
Something you said before in a previous show about weeds in the garden, it kind of turned things upside down for my way of thinking. What about weeds in the garden? Are they good or bad?
You're throwing me the best softballs in the world, man. That is an allegory for life, honestly. You know, pulling weeds and the concept of a weed. You know, this one, there was a chapter in Secrets of the Soil on this very conversation. And, you know, a weed is a plant growing in the wrong place, right? People have that understanding. But what we don't really get to is that, you know, the only way soil can regenerate itself, there's a concept called succession. And if you burned an acre and you let it regrow, the first thing that's going to grow is annual plants, typically weeds, right? Then the perennial plants like grass, then shrubs, then tree, old growth forest. So nature is moving in this way of maturing itself, and the mechanisms, the tools that it uses to do that are weeds, one, and microorganisms. And it's very interesting that agriculture is built to combat those things. We're basically keeping ourselves in the state of immaturity in the soil that forces us to what Charles Walters of Acres USA called toxic rescue chemistry. You know, it's no different than going to a doctor and them giving you a pill to manage your symptoms. You know, they're not going to ask you to change your diet and take a probiotic typically. And that's what we're seeing, the same parallel in agriculture. You go to the extension service and they're telling you to use Miracle-Gro and Roundup, right? Essentially. So, you know, the experts are actually giving us the opposite of the advice we would want if we asked ourselves. And now to show up for themselves, which is really wild, but that's kind of where we're at. So, you know, that component of how all of that plays together is critically important. And the weeds, you know, the point, way to make the point, everybody knows the dandelion. You know, dandelions, and this is a way of talking about it, and it's not black and white, but it is absolutely true. The dandelions, one of their roles is to break the soil up. If you've ever pulled one up, their taproot goes down kind of the middle of the earth almost. And what it's doing is sequestering nutrition from the subsoil, bringing that up into the organism of the annual plant, and then the annual weed dies to regenerate what's missing in the soil. So I developed this knowledge through the organic lawn care company that I've mentioned. I have a soil test called Soil Test Solutions. It's a process that uses a private lab. Unfortunately, the extension doesn't look for the number of elements a plant needs. So for example, if you were going to grow a plant in water, it's called hydroponics, you would need 17 elements to do that. And some people will argue, but for the sake of the discussion, 17 elements. Something like Miracle-Gro, it's got 7 elements in it. So it's fast food. It's taking advantage of the soil. What's not being added is being used and harvested, and then eventually it runs out. We get deficiencies and pests and diseases and all of these things. So what weeds are doing are regenerating what's not there. So when you're force feeding your lawn nitrogen fertilizers, it's like a 30-0-0, nothing but nitrogen. You might get this green up. You're creating obesity in the grass. So it looks as if you're doing a good thing, but the root system is 1/4 of an inch. And it's discouraging all of the balance that's required for plants to grow in a healthy way. And so that logic, once you see it, the idea is not to grow the grass. Let's take a soil test. Let's look at your balance and let's move towards balance. And when you do that, you mitigate the need for the weed to grow. I got to the point 3 years into this lawn care company that I could tell the client what their deficiency was in the soil loosely before we ever took the soil test because of the weeds that were growing. The weed spectrum told us the deficiencies, right? It's an indicator. So rather than trying to go kill the weed and then further the problem, you know, the vicious cycle that you're in, you take an inventory, you list it, and you bring the minerals that they're growing for, and then you strengthen the turf biologically, and you got roots down in the ground. The system has moved to more maturity, and the weeds are not needed. The conventional mindset is the weeds are coming from my neighbor's yard or that I have some form of contamination. It's the same as pest and disease, you know. Pests flew by my neighborhood and they landed on my plant. Well, that's your inclination, then go kill it. But what's really happening is the pest sees food, primarily from the nitrogen fertilizers that you're feeding your plant, force feed create amino acids, empty proteins. That's the food of pests. They can't digest complete proteins, and they actually can see it with the antenna in the infrared. So we're attracting pests through the way that we're feeding them. And it's the same with disease. What happens to people when we eat fast food for every meal? We make movies out of it, right? I mean, so these things are common sense. We're just got to connect the dots, really.
That is just amazing, and that's fantastic news for me. I have so much to learn, and I'm definitely going to add Secrets of the Soil to my reading list, because yeah, I've been growing my own food for several years now, but there's always room for improvement. Absolutely.
Oh man, that is actually the thing that's so cool about gardening is that you can always get better at it, right? Like it's never ending well, and it grows on you in this magical way. So yeah, I'm excited to talk to you about Secrets of the Soil because that's one of my favorite things to do is introduce.
So, your website, do you want to, what services and products, now, what exactly, do you offer on the website now with
Yeah, well, I appreciate you asking that. You know, when I kind of came out of my bubble, and sold my business, this was January of last year, and I set this website up, and I haven't changed it a whole lot, and I've gone down a lot of different avenues. I haven't really pushed the services that I do. But to your question, I'd like to. I'd love to connect with people. But the mantra that I have for this business, the tagline is what we think, we grow. You know, our perspective drives our actions. Like I was saying a minute ago, if we think pests are bad luck, well, then it makes sense people are going out and trying to kill them, right? But if you think about it one more step, we understand that we're stressing the plant. We're stressing all the microbes in the ecosystem, if you will, right? Oh, we don't want to do that. We want to bring balance. You don't see a pest infestation in the forest or a prairie, you know, growing in balance. So, you know, that concept, a lot of what I do is help people think through these things. And then I offer the Soil Test Solutions product that you go to loganlabs.com and get a sample, costs $25. And they give me the data in a form that I can work with. And then I run it through a process I've developed that spits out the deficiency per element or the excess and writes up a little report of what you need to add per acre, per 1,000 square feet to generate the balance. And it's interesting for people that understand soil science out there on at least surface level, most people chase the pH, you know. pH is a measure of hydrogen ions. And, you know, people are familiar with adding lime to increase pH. What you're doing is you're adding calcium that's held by the cation exchange capacity, positive element. Hydrogen is also a positive element. So when you have empty soil, you have acidic soil because you got hydrogen filling the exchange capacity. When you're adding lime, you're displacing hydrogen. Calcium is a stronger bond. All bonds are stronger. And therefore, the hydrogen goes away and the pH goes up. So you can correct the number on a piece of paper 100% of the time with an acidic soil and lime. But what if you have a potassium deficiency or a manganese deficiency? You're not, the extension is not even looking for what's missing. It's looking for a number on a piece of paper. And the irony is, the reason I went down that road is that when you get this balance generated within a range, the pH is always perfect. It's the afterthought of the balance, right? So that conversation can revolutionize the way the results that people get, but the way that people grow, not to mention starting to talk about microorganisms and biodynamics, and life force and soil structure, and that's kind of the physical, mineral, biological, energetic conversation. So I just picked up somebody today that found me through the internet. They want to grow 2.5 acres of hemp on a 10-acre vegetable farm. I work on a farm every Friday. They're doing a vertical CBD tincture, and so their numbers are kind of skewed. But he determined that an acre was worth $30,000 growing cannabis, as opposed to, you know, hundreds of dollars with other crops. So all the farmers, especially in my area where we've legalized hemp, and now the CBD in the Farm Bill, are looking at that as a crop. So I consult commercial cannabis operations. I consult conventional farmers. I consult backyard gardeners. It doesn't really matter. And I have some methods of engagement through the soil testing program. I also have an option where you can hire me to be on call for a month through the phone or through the email, or a single call, you know, for an hour just to get rooted. And so we just kind of, every situation is different, you know. So I would love it if people reached out that see this, that wanted to get more into self-sufficiency in gardening. You know, most of farming is going out, as you know, go out there and doing it. You know, you can't read a book on farming and be a good farmer. But there are absolutely ways in which we can approach the living system that not only catalyze the time it takes to generate this type of result. Sometimes it could take hundreds of years. You can do in seasons, with the right intention. But it's really about regenerative agriculture. Setting it up not conventionally is drowning. Organics is kind of treading water. Regenerative is swimming where you want to go. Is getting more out of the system than the system can offer based on what we've done to it. Unfortunately, we can't sustain what we have and call it good enough at this point. So, yeah, I appreciate the question. Beagriculture.com. Happy to answer simple questions just on a human level. But if we want to get in the ring and really kind of take things up a notch, that's what I do for sure.
That's great. It's amazing what you're doing. I can see it can get very complicated at the same time. Just take a deep breath and don't panic. Just get the seed in the ground. That's if nothing else.
Yeah. That's I say that because you're right, and I don't like to shy away from the technical aspect. A lot of it is just different than how we're taught to think, which is a lot of the complication. But what I normally find is walking through the questions that inevitably come up and some of the logic of it. Once we get to that clarity of what we're doing, it's actually a lot simpler than what we're doing otherwise. I mean, when at my garden center, I'll never forget. I'd see, inevitably it would be a man walking in with a square foot gardening book, right? And most of the time he was like either an accountant or like an engineer or had this analytical mind and was squaring off his raised bed, planting by the inch, and that's all well and good, but man, it doesn't work like that, right? You're holding so tight to the recipe or the way in which to do it that you're not letting the system be what it can be. And so a lot of it is an exercise of letting go of what we already know, which is maybe one of the more difficult things for humans to do, right?
Yeah, and that's hard to do across the whole spectrum of taking the red pill, basically. And that's the overlying theme of the whole Red Pill Expo coming up. So yeah, I look forward to meeting you in Hartford next month. Do I dare ask what your speech is going to be about?
Well, it's funny. I'm glad it wasn't specifically on what it is because it's still evolving a little bit. But what I want to deliver is, the veil that has been pulled over our eyes in terms of how we eat. That food can wake us up. That real food, living food, can wake us up. And what I've discovered in my work with cannabis, it's very interesting, is that, it's a drop in the bucket of agriculture. It's not the point of what I do, but I had a hydroponic store for 15 years, and I had the DEA walking through my front door with a tie-dyed Grateful Dead shirt on, wanting to grow some marijuana. And if I didn't have my wits about me, they could have taken my business, and that happened to friends of mine. So there was a lot of stinging going on in that regard. So I had to be very aware of it. And frankly, it developed a lot of the groundwork that is culminating in the legalization and the acceptance of it now. So it's high level of respect. But what happens is it's a once in a lifetime agricultural opportunity. You've got this black market and this valuation and this kind of maturity of this crop that in a new state you can grow a plant for $75 and sell that for $1,500 on the market. You can't do that with squash, right?
No.
So that's why all the farmers are now markets mature and things will, even out over the years, but we're still opening new states, so it's going to be a while. So the point being is there's a tremendous amount of investment potential, not only from the people that are making the money in the cannabis industry, from all the money that's coming into it, which is an interesting space because you've got the black market meeting hedge fund managers. And there's really a lack of language there, right? And a lot of what I do is kind of sit at the table with one foot in each door and help each other speak the other language. But what I want to bring out in this talk is that the way in which cannabis is grown for active ingredients. It's a medicine, right? So we know the CBD and the THC and the CBG and these things in the crop. A lot of times the labs identifying this are in the grows directly because they want the agriculture to increase the amount of the active ingredient. That's the way food should be grown. And what's really sad and fascinating is that there is no market for food quality on earth. People might think about organics, but organics, it really amounts to what's not supposed to be there. It doesn't have any mandate for food quality or for nutritional value whatsoever. So without that market, there's no way for you and I to go out to a grocery store and vote for better food. And the Bionutrient Food Association, Dan Kittredge, who's the director of that, he's speaking either before or after me. We're going to tag team it a little bit. I think probably after. He's developing what's called the bionutrient meter, which is a spectrometer that can read food quality at the point of sale with a laser. And it sounds like far out, but this is pretty established technology. It's just gotten to the point where it can be $200 in your pocket as a working unit. There's 300 of these units in the world generating data. The hard part is not the technology, it's what should a carrot be. You know, what nutritionally, what are the markers that we look for? Is it 2000 or 200? And what is the range of good, better, best within that for a Denver carrot? That work has never been done, right? So as we develop the sophistication with this database, you can probably see it now in your head. Not only does it create a market for us to go vote for better food, it creates a market for farmers to grow better food and be compensated for it, which is currently non-existent and reliant on the better angels of good farmers. So I'm involved in the process of not only identifying that food, but then developing SOPs and feeding schedules that help farmers transition to increasing the nutritional value of what they're growing and creating that food market. So I say all of that, it's fascinating, but cannabis is that market already. I call it strain-specific fertility, and I work with growers that are testing their baseline soil, what they put into the soil through the grow, test the soil at the end of the grow, and you can loosely tell yourself what that plant pulled from that spectrum, and then set the soils up more strategically to grow that strain differently, because the different strains of cannabis grow in different ways, maybe more than any other plant. It's kind of like dogs. You know, like all the different dogs, we did the same with cannabis. The book called Botany of Desire by Michael Pollan that has a really fascinating dialogue on how plants move people to diversify themselves. But to finish the point, basically cannabis is being grown for this qualitative value. I want to develop a system that we can, within cannabis and the economy that it allows, that we can then use in agriculture to grow better food. So I want to introduce kind of those themes of how we can change the food system, how cannabis can be a bridge, and then, you know, the food veil, if you will.
I'm definitely feeling optimistic, and I definitely look forward to following the progress of what's going to happen on that front. It's very encouraging. It certainly is, because let's face it, we need all the encouragement we can get these days in light of everything that's going on, and everything is connected. Everything is correlated, interlaced. It's also important. Evan, appreciate you talking to me today. I look forward again to talking to you again and meeting you at Red Pill. Yeah, any final thoughts then?
No, man, just to thank you for being present with me as well. I look forward to meeting you and all the other people looking to change the world and bring human autonomy and freedom. I learned the term agorism at the I'd never heard that before in my life, that it was even a method of thought, right? At the Anarchapulco, I was just telling you before the segment here. And so, you know, I'm equally inspired and rejuvenated to see the work that other people are doing, and we just need to keep connecting the dots.
Yeah, agorism is definitely an approach to things it's a solution. I first learned the term from James Corbett, the Corbett Report. He did one of his series of solutions, and since then I've considered myself an agorist.
Yeah.
And the agorist flag is the black and the gray, kind of at a diagonal, and representing the black and the gray market. It's
No, it brought up a lot. It connected a lot for me. It gave a structure to a lot of the impulses that I was feeling. You know, how do we, you know, Bucky Fuller, right? Do we change the system, or do we develop a new model that makes the existing one obsolete, right? And I think that's the way the world is growing up. We can't do it all from the center. You know, we're too diverse for that. So yeah, we got to get it figured out, man. But it's great to be connected with you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, man.